Darth Maul's red saber whirled with deadly speed as Qui-Gon Jinn retreated through the corridors of the power generator. Obi-Wan ran desperately after them, but the red energy gates closed one by one, separating master and apprentice. Qui-Gon was alone now, face to face with the Sith warrior, and each blow demanded all his concentration and experience. The Sith attacked mercilessly, his movements calculated and brutal. But Qui-Gon was not only a skilled fighter, he was a strategist who always found unexpected solutions. When Maul lunged with a double-spinning strike, Qui-Gon ducked at the last moment and used the Force to push a piece of metal that ricocheted off the Sith's head. The brief moment of disorientation was all Qui-Gon needed to turn the tide. He advanced with a series of attacks that pushed Maul to the edge of the reactor pit. The Sith tried to recover, but Qui-Gon was completely focused, his connection to the Force flowing through every movement. With one last precise strike, he disarmed Maul and used the Force to throw him away, causing the Sith to lose his balance and fall into the reactor pit. Obi-Wan watched everything through the energy field, his eyes wide with relief and admiration. When the gates finally opened, he ran to his master. Qui-Gon was breathing heavily, but he was unharmed, and he placed his hand on his Padawan's shoulder with a weary smile. The celebration on Naboo was grand, but Qui-Gon barely participated in the festivities. His mind was preoccupied with the boy, Anakin Skywalker, who had destroyed the droid control ship and saved the planet. He knew that the Council had denied the boy's training, but something inside him told him that this was a serious mistake. During the trip back to Coruscant, Qui-Gon meditated constantly, seeking guidance from the Force. Obi-Wan noticed his master's restlessness, but did not dare interrupt his thoughts. Anakin spent hours looking out the ship's window, watching the stars pass by, oblivious to the storm brewing around his destiny. Qui-Gon knew he would have to make a decision that could change not only his life, but the future of the entire galaxy. When they finally arrived at the Jedi Temple, Qui-Gon requested an immediate audience with the Council. The Masters gathered in the circular chamber, their faces serious as they awaited his words. Mace Windu crossed his arms, already anticipating what was to come. Qui-Gon stepped forward and declared in a firm voice that he would train Anakin Skywalker, even if it meant leaving the Jedi Order. The silence that followed was deep and heavy. Yoda closed his eyes for a long moment, feeling the currents of the Force moving in ways he did not fully understand. Plo Koon tilted his head, considering the implications, while Ki-Adi-Mundi frowned with obvious concern. Yoda finally opened his eyes and looked directly at Qui-Gon. "Strong is your conviction, Qui-Gon. Always has been with you." He tapped his cane gently on the floor. "A Sith you defeated, proven your worth is. Perhaps right you are, perhaps wrong. But lose you, the Order cannot." Mace Windu sighed deeply, clearly unhappy with the decision but recognizing there was no other choice. He looked at Qui-Gon with an expression that mixed respect and apprehension. "You may train the boy, Qui-Gon, but under close observation. Any sign that he is following the path of fear, and the training will be stopped immediately." Qui-Gon nodded, knowing that this was the best concession he could get at that moment. When Qui-Gon told Anakin that he would be his master, the boy's face lit up in a way that touched the Jedi's heart deeply. "Are you really going to train me? Are you going to teach me the ways of the Force?" Anakin asked, barely able to contain his excitement. Qui-Gon knelt down to the boy's height and placed his hands on his shoulders. "Yes, Anakin, but you must understand that the Jedi way is not easy. It will require discipline, sacrifice, and a great deal of patience." Anakin nodded vigorously, his blue eyes shining with determination. In the first months of training, Qui-Gon noticed something extraordinary. Anakin not only learned quickly, but also shared his own questioning view of the Order's rigid dogmas. When Qui-Gon challenged traditional teachings, seeking a deeper understanding of the living Force, Anakin absorbed everything with enthusiasm, asking questions that many would consider inappropriate. "Master, why can't we use our emotions if they are part of who we are?" Anakin asked once. Qui-Gon smiled, recognizing the same intellectual rebelliousness that had always defined him. "Because, Anakin, emotions are powerful tools. We must not suppress them. but learn to understand them and use them wisely, not let them control us. The years passed, and Anakin Skywalker grew up under the careful tutelage of Qui-Gon Jinn, becoming the most skilled Padawan of his generation. Unlike other young Jedi who repressed their emotions until they exploded at critical moments, Anakin learned to recognize them, name them, and channel them constructively. Qui-Gon never punished the young man for feeling anger, fear, or frustration, but taught him to understand where those feelings came from and how to transform them. During training sessions, when Anakin failed at an exercise and frustration threatened to overwhelm him, Qui-Gon would simply sit down beside him and talk. Anger is not your enemy, Anakin. It's just a sign that something matters to you. The question is, what will you do with that feeling? This approach shaped Anakin in a fundamental way, creating a young Jedi who was emotionally intelligent and surprisingly centered for someone with so much power. On the night Anakin had his first nightmare about his mother, he woke up in a cold sweat with his heart racing. Instead of trying to meditate alone or hide his fears as many Padawans would, he immediately sought out Qui-Gon. He found his master meditating in the temple gardens, under the light of the 3 moons of Coruscant. "Master, I need to talk to you. I had a vision, or a dream. I'm not sure." Qui-Gon opened his eyes and gestured for Anakin to sit beside him. The young Padawan described the dream in detail, his mother in danger, suffering, calling for him. Qui-Gon listened attentively without interrupting, and when Anakin finished, he did not say it was just a dream or that he should let it go. Visions of the future are difficult to interpret, Anakin, but we must not ignore them. If your mother is in danger, then we must act. The decision to travel to Tatooine was immediate, and Qui-Gon didn't even ask the council for permission, knowing they would likely deny it. The journey to Tatooine was tense, with Anakin visibly anxious as they approached the desert planet. When they arrived at Mos Espa and searched for Shmi Skywalker, they discovered that she had been freed and married Cliegg Lars, a moisture farmer. But the news was terrible. She had been kidnapped by Tuskens just a few days earlier. Cliegg was consumed with grief and guilt. "She's been with them for almost a week. No one survives that long." The man's words hit Anakin like physical blows. Qui-Gon placed his hand on his Padawan's shoulder and felt the storm of emotions swirling inside him. "We'll find her, Anakin. We haven't lost hope yet." They followed the trail to the Tusken camp, arriving at dusk when the desert was beginning to cool. The infiltration of the camp was silent and precise, with Qui-Gon using the Force to distract the guards while Anakin located his mother. When he found her inside a makeshift tent, bound and wounded but still alive, something inside him threatened to break. Shmi opened her eyes and saw her son, now a young man wearing the robes of a Jedi. "Ani, you're back." Her voice was weak but full of love and relief. Anakin quickly freed her, holding her in his arms as tears streamed down his face. Anger against the Tuskens burned in his chest, a visceral desire to make them pay for every wound, every moment of suffering. But then Qui-Gon's hand touched his shoulder, and his master's calm voice cut through the red haze. "Anakin, we have to go. Now." They escaped the camp without spilling blood, and throughout the journey back to the Lars farm, Qui-Gon remained by Anakin's side, offering silent support as the young man processed the tsunami of emotions. Over the next few days, as Shmi recovered under the care of her new family, Qui-Gon had several deep conversations with Anakin about what had happened. "I wanted to kill them, Master. I wanted to make them all pay for what they did to her," Anakin confessed, the shame evident in his voice. Qui-Gon did not scold or judge. "It's natural to feel that way, Anakin. Your mother was suffering, and you love her. But you didn't act out of anger, and that's what matters. You chose the path of compassion even when everything in you screamed for revenge." This experience, paradoxically, strengthened Anakin rather than breaking him. He learned that he could feel intense emotions and still make the right choices. When they returned to Coruscant, Anakin carried an inner peace that many Jedi took decades to achieve. And when, years later, he fell in love with Padme Amidala during missions to protect her, he did not hide his feelings in shame and total secrecy. Anakin sought out Qui-Gon a week before the secret wedding on Naboo. "Master, I need to tell you something. I have fallen in love with Senator Amidala, and she with me. We are getting married." He expected shock, disappointment, perhaps even anger. Instead, Qui-Gon simply nodded as if he already knew. "Love is not the enemy, Anakin. The fear of losing those we love, the possessiveness, the attachment that turns into chains, those are the dangers. But genuine love, freely shared, can be a source of strength." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I will keep your secret, but you must be aware of the consequences if the Council finds out. And you must promise that you will never let your love for her turn into something that causes suffering." Anakin promised, and Qui-Gon kept his word, guarding the secret like a silent protector. When the Clone Wars began and the mission to Geonosis brought them into conflict with Count Dooku, Qui-Gon and Anakin were assigned to capture the Separatist leader while Obi-Wan led the main attack. The Geonosis arena was a chaotic battlefield when Qui-Gon and Anakin pursued Dooku to the secret hangar where his sonship awaited. The former Count turned to face them, his curved saber glowing red in the dim light of the hangar. Anakin activated his saber immediately, ready for combat, but Qui-Gon reached out, blocking his Padawan's path. "No, Anakin, this is no ordinary enemy." Qui-Gon's voice carried an emotional weight that Anakin rarely heard. Dooku watched the scene with a complex expression, where sadness and disdain mingled in a disturbing way. "Still clinging to old ties, Qui-Gon? I taught you better than that." Qui-Gon took a step forward, deactivating his saber in a deliberate gesture of vulnerability. "You taught me many things, Master Dooku. You taught me to question, to seek the truth beyond dogma. But what you are doing now, this war, these deaths, that is not seeking the truth." Anakin remained tense at the side, watching the exchange between former apprentice and former master, feeling the complex currents of the Force between them. Dooku laughed bitterly, but the sound was empty of true joy. "You have always been naive, my former apprentice. The Republic is rotten to the core, corrupted by politicians who serve only themselves. The Jedi have become blind soldiers serving a failed system. I offer an alternative, a new order." Qui-Gon shook his head slowly. "A new order built on war and tyranny? Do you truly believe that? Or are you being used?" The question pierced Dooku's defenses for a moment, a flash of uncertainty crossing his aristocratic face. Anakin noticed the hesitation and understood his master's strategy. It wasn't just a philosophical discussion. It was a genuine attempt at redemption. "Master Dooku, it's not too late. You can return, you can help fix what is broken from within." Anakin's voice was sincere, echoing the teachings of compassion that Qui-Gon had instilled in him. For a moment, something changed in the air of the hangar, as if destiny itself were holding its breath. But then the presence arrived, a wave of power and overwhelming force that made all three Jedi turn. Master Yoda entered the hangar, leaning on his cane, but radiating a force that made the ground tremble subtly. "It is over for you, Count. Surrender you must." Yoda's presence broke the fragile moment of connection between Qui-Gon and his former master. Dooku retreated toward his ship, his face closing again into a mask of cold determination. "This is not over, Qui-Gon. Soon you will see that I am right. You all will." He used the Force to bring down part of the ceiling between them, creating a barrier of debris, and within seconds his ship was taking off through the hangar opening. Yoda could have pursued him, but the Grand Master simply watched as the ship disappeared into the orange sky of Geonosis. "Much to think about, we have. There is more to this story than meets the eye." Anakin looked at Qui-Gon, seeing the pain on his master's face, and understood that some battles leave wounds deeper than lightsabers could ever cause. In the months that followed, the Clone Wars intensified, and Qui-Gon and Anakin found themselves leading clone troops in battles across the galaxy. But the conversation with Dooku had planted seeds of doubt in Qui-Gon that grew with each mission. He saw how the Jedi Council was becoming increasingly involved in military tactics, how Chancellor Palpatine was gaining more emergency powers, how the Republic itself was transforming into something unrecognizable. Anakin noticed his master's growing unease. "Do you think Master Dooku was right about the Republic?" he asked one night as they meditated together after a particularly brutal battle on Christoph Sis. Qui-Gon opened his eyes and looked at his Padawan. Not about the methods, never about the war and destruction, but about corruption, about how we lost our way. Maybe he had a point we refused to see. This radical honesty, this willingness to question everything, including his own beliefs, was what made Qui-Gon such an exceptional master and so dangerous in the eyes of the more conservative council. When the mission to rescue Chancellor Palpatine, who had been kidnapped above Coruscant, came up, Qui-Gon went to the rescue accompanied by Anakin. Obi-Wan was on another mission in the Outer Ring, so it was up to the Master and Padawan to invade General Grievous' flagship. The battle in space was intense, with starfighters exploding around them as their ship crossed the combat zone. Inside the Separatist ship, they faced legions of droids before finally reaching the observation chamber where Palpatine was being held. And there, waiting for them with 2 lightsabers drawn, was Count Dooku. "I knew it would be you, Qui-Gon. The Council always sends its rebels on the dirtiest missions." Dooku's voice was weary, as if the entire war had drained something essential from him. This time, there was no room for philosophical discussions. Dooku attacked with surprising speed for someone his age, his technique honed even more subtle and deadly than before. Qui-Gon and Anakin fought side by side, their timing perfect after years of training together. But Dooku was one of the greatest duelists the Jedi Order had ever produced, and even against 2 skilled opponents, he did not back down. The fight took them across the chamber, Dooku using his experience to separate Master and Padawan whenever possible. In a calculated move, he used the Force to hurl a metal beam at Qui-Gon, who was distracted for a split second, realizing the danger too late. The beam struck him with tremendous force, throwing him against the wall and knocking him unconscious. "Master!" Anakin cried, feeling the familiar anger burn in his chest. But this time something was different. The years of training with Qui-Gon, the lessons on channeling emotions without being overwhelmed by them, all converged in that moment. Anakin attacked Dooku with renewed fury, but it was a controlled, precise fury, transformed into something that was neither light nor darkness, but a synthesis that Dooku was not prepared to face. The duel between Anakin and Dooku intensified until the young Jedi found an opening in the Count's defenses. With 2 quick, precise strikes, he cut off Dooku's hands, causing the sabers to fall to the metal floor with a sharp clang. Dooku fell to his knees, staring at his cauterized stumps with an expression that mixed shock and something akin to relief. Anakin kept his lightsaber pointed at the Count's neck, his breathing heavy, the temptation to end it all pulsing through his veins. Palpatine, still strapped to the chair, shouted urgently, "Kill him, Anakin. He is too dangerous to be kept alive." The Chancellor's voice was strangely intense, almost desperate. But Anakin remembered all of Qui-Gon's lessons, all the times he had chosen compassion over revenge. He deactivated his lightsaber. "No. He will be tried by the Senate as he should be." At that moment, Qui-Gon regained consciousness, holding his aching head as he leaned against the wall to stand up. The sight that met Qui-Gon's eyes when he opened them shook him deeply. His former master, the man who had trained and shaped him, was kneeling on the floor without his hands, defeated but alive. He staggered over to Dooku, kneeling beside him. "Master, what happened to you? How did we get to this point?" Dooku looked at Qui-Gon with eyes that finally showed the truth behind all the masks. "I was a fool, Qui-Gon. I thought I was using the power of another for my own ends, but it was I who was being used all along." His words were cryptic, but they carried a weight of truth that made Qui-Gon shudder. They arrested Dooku and freed Palpatine, and throughout the chaotic escape from the falling ship, Qui-Gon couldn't stop thinking about his former master's last words. There was something bigger going on, a conspiracy he was only beginning to glimpse. Dooku was taken to a maximum security prison on Coruscant, where he would be held until trial. But on the 3rd night of his imprisonment, he was found dead in his cell. The official report spoke of medical complications from his injuries, but Qui-Gon didn't believe it for a second. He examined the scene himself, sensing the remnants of Force power still permeating the cell. Dooku had not died of natural causes. He had been murdered using the Force in a way that few could execute. When Qui-Gon visited Palpatine to report on the rescue mission, he observed the Chancellor with new eyes, sensing something amiss, a discordance in the Force that he couldn't quite identify. Anakin behaved in an exemplary manner, Chancellor. He showed great control and wisdom in sparing Count Dooku. Palpatine smiled, but the smile did not reach his eyes. Yes, very noble of him, although some would say it was a tactical mistake to leave such a dangerous enemy alive. Anakin sought out Qui-Gon immediately after Dooku's funeral, clearly disturbed. Master, when we were rescuing the Chancellor, Palpatine said something to me. He said I should kill Dooku, that he was too dangerous. But when I refused, I saw something in his eyes, an anger that shouldn't have been there. Qui-Gon listened intently, the pieces beginning to fall into place in a terrible way. He asked Anakin to continue his regular meetings with the Chancellor, something Palpatine had requested months ago under the pretext of political guidance, but this time with a different purpose. Observe everything he says and does, Anakin. Report everything to me, but be subtle. Don't let him notice your scrutiny. Anakin agreed, though confused about what exactly they were looking for. Over the next few weeks, he visited Palpatine several times, and each conversation increased his discomfort. The Chancellor spoke of power, of doing whatever was necessary to protect those he loved, of how sometimes the ends justified the means. The final turning point came one night when Anakin began having nightmares again, this time about Padme dying in childbirth. He woke up in a panic, terror gripping his throat like an invisible hand. But instead of letting the fear fester inside him, he sought out Qui-Gon before the sun had even risen. He found his master already awake, as if waiting for him. Master, I'm having visions again. Padme is in danger. She's going to die. Anakin's voice trembled, but he continued, telling him everything about his secret marriage, about the pregnancy, about the fears that consumed him. Qui-Gon showed no surprise about the marriage. He already knew and had chosen to protect that secret. Anakin, look at me. Do you remember your visions about your mother? They were warnings, not immutable destinies. We took action and changed the outcome. He placed his hands on his Padawan's shoulders. Death is part of life, and trying to control it only leads to suffering. But seeking ways to heal, to protect, that is different. We will find answers together, through the light, not the darkness. But Palpatine had other plans. On Anakin's next visit, the Chancellor was more insistent than ever. His words carefully chosen to plant doubts and fears. The Force has many aspects, Anakin, including abilities that some would consider unnatural. There was a Sith named Darth Plagueis who discovered how to use the Force to create life and prevent death. Anakin froze, every fiber of his being paying attention. How do you know this? Palpatine leaned back in his chair, his eyes studying Anakin carefully. There are many things the Jedi do not tell you. The dark side of the Force can offer solutions that they deny out of dogma, not wisdom. Anakin felt the temptation, so strong it was almost physical, but then Qui-Gon's voice echoed in his mind. He rose slowly. I need to think about this, Chancellor. With your permission, I will take my leave. Palpatine nodded, clearly pleased that he had planted the seed, unaware that Anakin would go straight to Qui-Gon with this information. The conversation between Master and Padawan lasted for hours, with Qui-Gon asking detailed questions about everything Palpatine had said and how he had said it. When Anakin mentioned Darth Plagueis and the story about creating life, Qui-Gon turned pale. Anakin, do you realize what this means? Palpatine should not have this knowledge unless he was, or had close contact with, a Sith Lord. The revelation hit them like a bolt of lightning. It all began to make sense. The emergency powers, the prolongation of the war, the convenient death of Dooku, even the Clone Wars themselves, which seemed orchestrated to weaken the Jedi and strengthen the Chancellor. Qui-Gon knew they had to act quickly, but carefully. He sought out Master Windu immediately, taking Anakin with him. Master Windu, we have discovered something that could change everything. Chancellor Palpatine is a Sith Lord, or at the very least has deep connections to the Sith. He tried to seduce Anakin with promises of power over death. Windu looked at them with initial skepticism, but the sincerity on their faces and the gravity of the accusation made him reconsider. These are dangerous times for dangerous accusations, Qui-Gon. But if you are right, then we have no choice but to act. Windu gathered a small group of trusted individuals. Himself, Qui-Gon, and Anakin. They went to Palpatine's office at the transition between day and night, when the sky of Coruscant shone with thousands of artificial lights. Palpatine greeted them with his characteristic smile, but his eyes narrowed when he saw the composition of the group. Master Windu, Qui-Gon, young Skywalker, to what do I owe this unexpected visit? Windu stepped forward, his imposing presence filling the room. Chancellor Palpatine, we have reason to believe that you are a Sith Lord. You are under arrest by the Jedi Order until we can investigate thoroughly. For a moment, the silence was absolute. Then Palpatine began to laugh, and with his laughter, the mask he had worn for decades finally fell away. Force lightning began to dance between his fingers, the dark power radiating from him in waves that made the windows rattle. Fools, did you really think you could stop me? I am the Senate. I am the power that holds this galaxy together. But Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, shaped by the balanced light of Qui-Gon Jinn, stepped forward. His blue lightsaber ignited with a sound that sounded like a verdict, and he did not hesitate. In that moment, facing the evil that had manipulated the entire galaxy, Anakin made the choice that would define everything. He struck with precision and purpose, cutting through the Force lightning and Palpatine himself in a single movement that was as beautiful as it was final. The Sith Lord fell, his expression of shock frozen on his face as his body disintegrated, the dark power that sustained him dissipating like smoke. The silence that followed was the silence of a prophecy fulfilled the way it should have been from the beginning. In the days following Palpatine's death, the galaxy plunged into controlled chaos as the truth about the Sith and the conspiracy was revealed to the Senate and the citizens of the Republic. Qui-Gon Jinn remained by Anakin's side throughout the process, offering support as his Padawan grappled with the weight of having killed the man who had tried to seduce him to the dark side. Unlike in the original timeline, Anakin carried no guilt or regret, only a serene clarity that he had done what was necessary to protect everything he loved. Padme survived childbirth, bringing twins Luke and Leia into a galaxy that was finally beginning to heal its wounds. The Clone Wars ended abruptly with the revelation that both sides had been manipulated by the same master, and the Jedi Council began a profound reform of its teachings, guided by the wisdom that emotions were not enemies but tools that needed to be understood. Qui-Gon watched everything with quiet satisfaction, knowing that by following the living Force and training Anakin with compassion rather than rigid dogma, he had changed the fate of trillions of lives. The Chosen One had brought balance to the Force, not through destruction but through redemption, proving that sometimes the greatest power is not in overcoming darkness, but in never allowing it to overcome you.